Hello and welcome back to my Java tutorial series. This is the second video. In this video we're going to cover operators and conditionals. Let's get started. Okay, to start we have all of the operators in Java listed here. An operator is just, your basic addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Those are all numeric operators and they will operate on numbers. There are a multitude of operators in Java, and if you're freaking out right now looking at this list going, how am I ever going to remember all this stuff? It's okay. I'm going to tell you which ones are important and which ones you can basically ignore. Obviously, addition, subtraction, and multiplication, division, those are all very important. Just for doing math, numbers, greater than, less than. We're actually going to cover these later with the conditionals, very important for Boolean operations. Greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, very important. Or equals, you can ignore that one. XOR, assign, you can ignore that one. Right shift, left shift, you can ignore all of those. Not equals, this one's important. We'll cover this one later as well with our conditionals. Same with equals to, the AND operator, the OR operator, and the NOT operator. Those are all very important. Modulus is important. It's numeric, just like the addition and subtraction ones. We will cover plus plus and minus minus. Plus equals, minus equals. Those are all important. Mod equals, I guess, and equals you can ignore. So you can, okay, most of these are somewhat important, but for the most part, you're just going to use a few of these, and the rest are pretty much like you're probably not ever going to use them, except for some specific edge cases. Now in the IDE we can see all of these operators that I showed you, at least the important ones. I cut out the non-important ones, so these are just the ones that you're likely to use. Let's see, so we have, to start we have addition, 1 plus 1. This will set addition equal to 2. We have subtraction, 1 minus 1, it'll set it to 0. I think you get the point. Modulus, you might not have used modulus before, but essentially what it does is it returns the remainder of these two if they were divided. So if you divide 1 and 1, and then it will give you the remainder, in this case 0. It's pretty useful for determining if a number is even or odd. It's probably one of the prime uses, or retrieving specific parts of a number. We have exponent. You just use this little symbol that you get from shift and 6. It'll do 1 to the power of 1, which is 1. Increment, which is the plus plus operator. This will add 1 to whatever variable you put here. Notice that I have created an I variable, and that's because in Java for this operator you have to use I, or it'll give you, or you don't have to use I, you have to use a variable, or it will give you an error. Same with the decrement variable. Interesting thing, you can actually do plus plus I if you wanted to. Now this is not typically how it's written, because this adds I to 1 or 0. It's like the inverse, but this is typically how it's written. That's kind of standard operating practice. Here we go, we have some booleans. The equals to operator, which is the two equal signs. So this will set it equal to true or false if 1 is equal to 1, which it is, so equality would be equal to true in this instance. Inequality, so this shows the not equals operator, which basically if 1 is not equals to 1, then it'll set it to true, and if it's equal, then it will set it to false, the inverse of the equality. Greater than is pretty self-explanatory. 1 is greater than 1, then it will set it to true, else false. Same with this one, except reverse. If 1 is less than 1, set it to true, else it's false. Greater than or equal to, if 1 is greater than or equal to 1, then it will set it to true, else false. And same with this one, except the inverse. These are all a lot of the important ones that you'll use a lot and definitely need to know, but you'll probably memorize them subconsciously. It's pretty easy to remember. Now let's go and move on to conditionals. We're going to put a lot of these to use when we do those. So let's look at that in the slides. Okay, so now you might be wondering, well, what is a conditional? And I will explain. A conditional is basically you'll have a condition, and if this condition is true, it'll execute whatever you want it to execute in the code block, and then it will do whatever comes after. If the statement is false, however, it'll ignore the code block and just go to the after. This is the basic logic of a conditional, and if we see here in Java how those are written is with what's called an if statement. So if value 1, whatever operator you put in here, we just covered the operators, so you could say equals to, for example. If value 1 is equals to value 2, execute whatever you put inside of these curly brackets. So that's the syntax. Let's see an actual example of one. Okay. So here's an example that you might use for like a bar, for example. You can't go into the bar unless you're greater than or equal to 21 years old. So if age is greater than or equal to 21, execute the code inside of these curly brackets here. So that's kind of the basic syntax. Let's go take a look at that in the IDE. Alright, now back in the IDE, I've gone and I've set up the example I used previously with age. So I have a variable here called age, and I've set age to 18. So we have a person and they're 18 years old. So this if statement is going to check if age is greater than or equal to 21, the legal drinking age in the United States. It will print to the console, you can drink. Else it'll just ignore this and it will move on to whatever is below it, which is currently nothing. Okay, so now let's run this and let's see what we get. It should say nothing. Should be the correct response here. Let me enlarge the console. Yes, as you can see, it exited and there was nothing printed to the screen. So now what do you want to do if you want to say, well, they're not 21, but you still want to output something and say, like, you can't drink? Well, for that, you use what's called an else statement. That's written just like this. So as you can see here, we have if this. So if this isn't true, it will run whatever is in the else block. And if this is true, it will not run the else block. So if we want to run this again, it should say you can't drink. And if you look at that, it says you can't drink, which is correct, you can't. And if we make this 21, for example, and we run this one more time, you can drink. This is a very basic if statement. Now there's one other part of an if statement that you can cover here, and that is an else if statement. So else if statements work like this. So maybe I don't know how to make one work for this scenario. It's not really gonna make any sense, but sure, here we go. Just prints. Yeah, sure, you can vote. Okay. So now it will say if age is greater than or equal to 21, you're allowed to drink. Or if age is greater than or equal to 18, you're allowed to vote. And we could pile these on. If age is equal to 16, you can drive. And we could move this down, so on and so on, with all of the permissions you get at each age. But here, let's just try putting stuff in. So if we do 21, for example, What is the highest privilege you have access to? You can drink. But what if you're not 21 and you're 20? What can you do then? Well, you can vote. And if you're, say, 16, you can drive. So you can see how our logic here goes, and it goes from age, it goes from the top to the bottom, checking if each one is true, um, until reaching the bottom. We can even do an else. You can't do anything. There we go. So if you're a 12-year-old, I'm sorry, but you can't do anything. Okay, I think that just about concludes this episode. I think it's already getting a little bit long, so I hope you enjoyed. Please watch the next one. Goodbye.